Good morning. My name is Bill Pollack, and we're in Corona, California, and the gentleman on my left is Tom Malloy, and we're in his phenomenal trophy room, and it's April 27th, 2010, and we're going to explore some of Tom's history and this incredible collection of automobiles that he has. Tom, pleasure to be here, and I'd like to really, where did it start? What really got you going into cars?
Well, Bill, first of all, thanks for being here, and thanks for even thinking about me, referencing what you're doing here with the Peterson and you know, the archives and all the things, the history of racing, and I'm just honored to be included in that, to be honest with you. That being said, I mean, this thing that I have around me here is I guess a childhood fantasy, from the standpoint that my dad was involved in racing. He was a contractor in Inglewood, California. Came out here in the late 20s from Iowa, a little town called New Hampton, Iowa, and had gas stations prior to his construction business, and loved cars, loved horses, loved fast horses, and he got involved. And I was too young to really know the people, other than the fact that he got involved with a fella down in Gardena, and he took some machinery down there. Next thing you know, he was building a racetrack, and that was Gardena Bowl, and it was carved out of a ground just adjacent to a dump in a slough in Gardena, just west of Vermont. It was 174th in Vermont was the actual address of the property for mailing purposes. And he carved out this racetrack out of this clay, natural soil down there. And I was just, like I say, at that particular time, I was probably 7 or 8 years old. And I had a childhood to die for, from the standpoint I happened to be the oldest son. His oldest son, he had 3 more sons and 5 daughters. And I loved his tractors, as I said, and all the dirt and everything that went with it. And then along, you know, the racetrack came, and cars. Then later on, he owned a very famous sprint car that he bought from J.C. Agajanian, of all people. And Rex Mays drove it at first, and then later on, a young guy named Troy Ruttman drove the car.
Troy.
Yeah, and became a very famous sprint car, along with other drivers like Andy Linden and Mel Hansen and Gordon Reed. Bill Vukovich, to name a few, all drove that sprint car, and Bob Pankratz was his mechanic, and the one that basically pretty much changed the race car, the sprint car, over the years from what it was until what it eventually turned out to be. And again, like I say, a very famous sprint car around the West and the Midwest. Troy Ruttman went back there as a young kid, 19 years old, and pretty much, you know, turned the hills, as they say, upside down for a young kid.
Wow.
And you know, then he sold the car to Dwayne Carter, and a few owners later, eventually that car ended up at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where it sits today, which is really a nice thing for me to know where the car is. Unfortunately, it's in the America Power colors that Dwayne made so famous in the car. And but at least I know where the car is. Right. And I've tried several times to get that car out of there and put it back to the Malloy special, but I think it's there forever, and like I say, a great place for it to be, and at least I know where the car is. In '52, Bob Pankratz, and that name being very familiar, is Wally's dad, and he built another car from the ground up for my dad. It was a championship car to race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and in those days they raced in all the fairgrounds.
Now, did your dad drive?
My dad never drove the cars. He owned a construction business and owned the race cars and owned a racetrack and raised a big family, but he never drove cars, other than he got in the sprint car one time down at Carroll, and when they were practicing one time, and he pretty much said that it scared him to death.
I can understand that. I
Yes.
absolutely can.
Yeah, I mean, to see those professionals go around that place sideways and then see my dad kind of putting around, you could tell the difference between a racer and a guy that owned the race car. And he would never allow me to drive his cars. I was never allowed. I could sit in them, and like I've told people before, you know, I won the Indianapolis 500 3 times in a row, sitting in my dad's race car, dreaming about it. But he would not allow me to drive a race car. I drove very early in life. I was about 8 years old, and I was driving his tractors, and nothing in a business way. But I got to run him around his yard,
Sure.
and play with the bucket and scrape dirt and things like that. And then I had an old Ford pickup truck that he kept down at the racetrack for Carroll. That was basically, in a sense, if you could say, my truck. And I'd go down there anytime I was out of school or on a weekend or after school, and I could jump in this truck and go do anything I wanted to around the property. And one of my jobs was to pick up all the old broken bottles and beer cans out in the parking lot. In those days, they were, you served beer, actual bottles, until they started throwing them, and the next thing you know, you had to start pouring them in paper cups. But the cans were not aluminum in those days, and those would be strewn all over the parking lot. And I'd take the pickup truck out there and put it in low gear, and it'd just idle along. And I'd jump off and run and get the cans and throw them in the back. And then I'd jump on the running board and turn the wheel if it kind of started wandering. But I mean, that's the kind of liberty I had. And I'm probably 9, 10 years old, out there in this parking lot picking up beer cans, and broken beer bottles and broken beer bottles.
Great job for.
I mean, like I've told more than one person that when I die, if I deserve heaven, quite honestly, I feel I've been there. I had a childhood that, because of the things I liked and the things my dad liked and the things that he included me in everything. I think I've been there. I hope that doesn't sound too.
Like
I hope that doesn't sound too bad, but I mean, it was quite a time for a young guy that just couldn't get enough of the stuff that his dad was involved in. So that's kind of how the whole thing started. And then as I grew up and I saw the pressure that my dad put himself under with reference to racing, because it's literally a drug, the professional racing. Once you get sucked into it, it's hard to get away from it. And I would see the time and the pressure and stuff that he put himself through. And I made up my mind, that even though this is something I like, that if I ever do it, I'm never going to do it on a professional basis, because I knew what that cost, and money and emotion. And if I ever did it, I was going to make sure I could do it and not hurt anybody. In other words, financially or emotionally. So I raised a family.
Those are pretty lofty goals.
Yeah, but I
mean,
learned.
they were good.
I think Dad would be proud of me that I saw what he went through, and decided to do something different.
I would say not too many people would put that kind of control on themselves.
Yeah, it is kind of strange at times, because you
That's good.
see so many young people who get involved with it and aren't financially and even emotionally ready, and it really ends up killing them. I mean, not personally, not physically, but I mean, just financially kills them. We've seen so many of those over the years. So anyway, that being said, I got out of college, was married, raising a family, starting a business. Dad and I were in the construction business together, and shortly after he passed away, I quit the construction business and started a business called Trench Shoring Company. And my company supplies all types of shoring equipment for the contractors who dig ditches in the ground to keep the employees safe while they're working down there, and then the steel plates that you drive over on the street.
Mm-hmm.
We rent those out. Kind of a crazy thing.
Really?
But and so anyway, I focused on that business and worked hard at it, and I finally got to a place. This was 1992, and Dad had been gone about 25 years, and I said, maybe he won't mind. And I took a 3-day driving school, Skip Barber driving school up at Sears Point, which is now in Finian, and it was everything that I thought it'd be. I loved it, a little Formula Ford. And I bought my first car shortly after that. And as just kind of an aside, if anybody wants to know how to get into the vintage race driving business, I say this with a smile on my face, I'm an expert at it because I got into it all wrong. So I can tell you how to do it correctly. What I did is I bought the car that Trent Shoring Company's partially sponsored at Indianapolis in 1988. It was an 86 March Cosworth engine. And I bought that at Foyt's auction in 92. And I took it out to Willow Springs and played with it and practiced with it. And I thought about 1996 that I was capable of doing a vintage race. So I joined Vintage Auto Racing Association and had my first race. The first race I participated in, if I can say that, was at Palm Springs in November of 96. And even though I thought I was ready and I had this big car and this is all the stuff I wanted to do, when they dropped that green flag, I didn't know which way was up. And that was the biggest shock I ever had in my life. And absolutely not capable of running this car. It's a wonder I didn't hurt a lot of people, including myself. So anyway, I eventually ended up getting a Brabham BT18. And wherever I may be as a vintage racer, it's all because of this little Brabham BT18. I finally got a car that was helpful and teach me a lot about how to drive a race car. I still have that car. It's my favorite car. And then after that, I just started collecting. I bought the second car that I owned, and I still have that car, is a replica Watson. It's a Watson Roadster put together by Ronnie Ward, Roger Ward's brother. You couldn't tell it from a real one. But I love the car. Maybe one of these days I'll get rid of it. It's a replica of the '59 Winter. And then after that, I just started collecting different cars that I thought would mean a lot to my collection. It's a potpourri of every kind of race car you can find. Formula cars, Indianapolis cars, Champ dirt cars, and some very famous ones, what I'm very honored to have. So.
Well, we're going to take a look at those in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
How many cars do you estimate?
It's in the vicinity of 50.
Huh?
I think it's in the vicinity of 50 cars I have.
Looks like twice or three times.
Yeah, and you're here today, and I mentioned to you earlier, some of them are on the road right now. I'll be a big vintage race called the Walter Mitty at Road Atlanta this coming weekend.
Uh-huh.
And I've got two of my cars and a friend of mine's car, my trailer, on the way to Rizzleton. I think that's how you pronounce it.
So you're going to go back there and drive them yourself?
Yeah, I'll leave Thursday, my wife and I, and I'll be racing a Toyota GTP car that I bought from Dan Gurney. And those are the ones that won Fangio and P.J. Jones made so famous back in the early 90s and won all the IMSA races.
Right.
And then I also have in the trailer a Lola T332 Formula 5000, a former John Gunn car. And I'll be racing both of those this coming weekend at the Walter Mitty at Road Atlanta. So it's an event I really enjoy, and I think this might be about the fourth time that I've gotten back there for that event. But it's quite a vintage event, and a lot of beautiful vintage race cars show up for it. So.
Outside of Road Atlanta, where are some of the other venues that you like?
Well, one of my favorite racetracks and a lot of people feel the same way, is Road America. Mm-hmm. It's just a beautiful, long, fast, and even technical racetrack in a beautiful part of the Midwest and Elkhart Lake. Interestingly enough, as crazy as this sounds, I like the little road course at Phoenix International for some reason. That might sound two completely different places, Road America,
yeah,
and Phoenix International. But for some reason, I like that little racetrack. It's real challenging, because it like Daytona and those different ones, it incorporates part of the oval. And if you're going to go fast at those racetracks, you got to be going quick coming off of turn 4 at Phoenix, and that means you get up real close to that wall. And so it's a challenge, it's a neat little place. I've raced all over I hate to sound, but I mean, I've raced all over the world. I mean, I've been so lucky with this vintage thing. I've actually raced on racetracks that I never even thought I'd ever see as a spectator. You know, Monza. I'm sorry, not Monza, but Le Mans. I've raced over several
What
racetracks.
did you drive at Le Mans?
GT40 Mark IV. I've raced in New Zealand, at Albert Park in Australia. Same car, the GT40. New Zealand, I've taken my T70 Lola, my Brabham, and my McLaren M8E 2 different times. And just had wonderful times at these different places that I've raced. I've been to Goodwood, I think, at least 3 times. Been invited to take cars there. What an experience that is. I mean, even though you just... The one I've gone to is the one where you just drive up the driveway. It's not the Revival where they actually race. I haven't been to that yet. But and then I raced all over the United States. I mean, from Lime Rock, the Glen, Road Americas I talked about, Daytona. I've actually done, in a professional way, if I could say it that way, even though you don't get any purse money, I've done the 24 Hours of Daytona 2 times. And something I never imagined in my life, you know, and have finished fairly well for a vintage racer amongst the people I compete with. You know, I've won some races and finish up near the front, which I like to do. I like to have my equipment show up in good shape. And the worst thing, the one thing you don't want to do is show up with beautiful equipment that is really special and embarrass it. You really owe it to the car not to embarrass it.
That's true. That's true.
So I have to work maybe a little harder than I'm capable of doing sometimes not to embarrass that race car. So
Have you run at Monterey?
yes, I've run Monterey several times. Last year I drove the Porsche was the marquee car, and I had a 962 Porsche there and finished 5th amongst about 30 cars.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and three of the 4 people that finished in front of me are all professional racers. So I didn't feel too bad about that.
No.
Yeah. So I just, and along with that, I did the Quail Rally, which is a part of that whole weekend. I mean, there's things
Yeah.
going all the way over the Monterey Peninsula, but I did the Quail Rally and raced at the Historics with the 962 and an old hot rod that I brought, the old Rosie Roselle dirt track. You know, well, they raced them everywhere, but the California Roadster type thing, if I can say it that way, where most all the, you know, so many people don't really remember or even know that, you know, the likes of, you know, Pat Flaherty and Dick and Jim Rathman and Andy Linden and Troy Ruttman, and I could go on down, Manuel
Cal
Eulo,
Nyday.
Jack McGriff, they all, Rosie Roselle, they all most all of them started in those old hot rods, as we know, you know, the Roadsters, as
Roadster.
they were known as back in those days.
That's right.
And most people don't, they go, what is that thing? I says, well, that's the start of the whole racing thing, particularly in Southern California. I said, that's where all the big time drivers, most of these guys won the Indianapolis Motor Speedway over the years, are competed fairly well there, and all started in these old Roadsters. And I'm lucky enough to have a couple of them, and one of them is the Rosie Roselle car, which I bought from Rosie just shortly before he passed away, and thrilled to have it, and it's just a part of racing history in Southern California. So,
Goodness.
yeah.
Well, it sounds to me like you're pursuing every racing enthusiast's dream, having this incredible collection of cars to pick and choose from, and the wherewithal to be able to go to all these various venues.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's beyond anything I imagined, and I tell people I'm not embarrassed or afraid
Wonderful.
to tell anybody that wants to hear it that it's
I think it's
beyond
great.
anything I've ever imagined. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I know Dad's looking down. He would really love this.
Yeah.
I get a bang out of it, but I think he'd get a bigger bang out of it.
Yeah.
And I'll say this for the record also, that, you know, there's days here, we're upstairs now in my place, but there's days here later, like it gets you know, dark earlier in the day, and the gal that works here for me, Jeannie, is gone, and my mechanics are gone, and I've stayed late to do something, and I want to go out in the shop to see what they, you know, because this is a working shop. I think you probably noticed that. I mean,
Yes.
not only do I have my cars here, but I have a shop right here, and it's all in the same building, and they work on my cars and stuff. But so I may have missed them before they went home, and I might want to go out to see what they were working on, or leave a note and put it on Mark Hart's. He's my head mechanic. Put it on his toolbox, something I forgot to tell him before he left. And I'll get about, it'll be say 5:30 or so. The sun will just be going down, and there's windows on the back of the building where a little light from the west is kind of sneaking through, and there's no lights on in the building. And you know, the sunlight is glistening off the cars. And I get about halfway out to where the shop is, and I quite honestly, and I'm sincere as I can be when I tell you this, I'm waiting for the guy that really owns this place to say, "Hey kid, get out of here, we're closed." And I say that from the bottom of my heart. I mean, it's beyond anything I ever imagined, you know, to be surrounded by this stuff, a lot of which I actually saw run either at the Speedway or on some dirt track someplace. So it's really quite a deal.
That's a great story.
Yeah, well, thank you for allowing me to share it with you. So.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, and you're doing it right. You know, a lot of people would, you know, it's not that easy to do what you're doing, and to do it right, and to have everything neat and proper, and not mess it up.
Yeah, well, it's nice of you to say. I'll have this for a period of time, and whether I have enough sense, you know, between now and, you know, you think about these things, and whether I'll have enough sense between now and maybe 10 years from now, if my health stays good, that I'll take the time to sell it, because I'm just the custodian for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm gone for someone, I don't take advantage of that, and I'm gone, and my children do it, you know. At least you're maintaining a part of history, racing history.
Yeah.
And it'll be split up, I'm sure. Most of these things don't sell as a unit, and I understand that, but at least I've done the best I could do while I had it, and hopefully somebody else will take just as good a care or better once it's gone. That's going to be a tough day if I'm the one that does it. If I'm gone and my children do it, it might not be that tough, even though they have for this. So.
Exactly. Yeah. And nobody could duplicate what you would do. You know.
Yeah. Everybody's going to do it their way.
But you would.
And one thing you haven't seen yet, I don't think, that I'll show you before you leave, is in the office downstairs. Every one of these cars that I have has a book, and everything in that book has obviously to do with that car, and it's really the history of the car, the chronology of the car. You know, because these things have gone through different transformations and things like that over the years, where tails have been changed or this has been changed, but the whole photo history is there for each one of these cars, and there's a couple of them here you see before you leave that were complete and total restorations. We still have more of those to do. And to see the picture of what it was when I bought it and what it is now even surprises me at times. You know, but we've got it back to what it was supposed to be at that period, and very proud of, and the people who have seen it, that knew the car, former mechanics and drivers and things like that, they're really astounded, and they're so thrilled that this thing was brought back to life, if I can say that.
That is exciting.
Yeah. As opposed to going through some you know, shredding machine or something like that.
Well, I know what it's like. I had wrecked a car.
Yeah.
And it was a total, and it disappeared for 20 years, and then all of a sudden it surfaced, and they restored it. And when I first saw it, and they had taken it back to exactly the way it was in 1952, right down to the proper dash plaques and the color of the upholstery and everything. It was you know, it was like a rebirth kind of a.
And then, you know, a couple other things I'll just add is, you know, the car that Bob built for my dad in '52, and he tried to qualify it with at the Speedway in '53 and didn't qualify, and then the car qualified in '54 and '55 with Jimmy Reese. I can't find that car, and it was built right in Torrance at Bob's shop, and he built two of them very similar. One for Sid Street that got back there in '52 and didn't make the race. And then he built Dad's car that got back there in '53 and didn't make the race that year. But again, it did in '54 and '55. But I know where the sprint car is, which is at the Speedway Museum. But I can't find either one of those cars, which has really frustrated me. And I've to tell you how bad this sickness is. I mean, I've actually paid people to look for these cars. And we get close, and then all of a sudden it goes away. Yeah. Or we find another picture of the car that we'd never seen before, and we try to track that down. But if I could find either one of those cars, I could tell you which one was Dad's, because of the uniqueness of it and how close I was to it back then. So, that's a frustrating thing, and that, as we talked about, that may have already met at the shredder someplace. You're hoping someday you open up a barn and there the damn thing will be sitting, but now it's 60 plus years, and that's quite a long time to hope that something's still around, even though you still do find them. So and then it was, I think, December of last year. It's not that important, but a couple of friends of mine call me up, and I've got more than those than I need sometimes, and tell me about things that are for sale. Just what you need, friends telling you about what's for sale. But I'm really honored to have people like that, because it gives you an opportunity to maybe find things that you weren't looking for. But I got a couple of friends of mine call me up and said, Tom, did you know that the Novi engines are for sale? And I said, I didn't even know there were any around. That's how far away I was from it. He says, yeah, they're on eBay.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
really?
So now why would Tom Malloy do that? Well, 2 years ago I bought Ed Pink racing engines. And Ed's still there, runs the place, along with Frank Hansowitz, who's the general manager. And we do a lot of vintage and professional race car engines. We do some of them for Toyota, and a lot of different people around. But I said to myself, excuse me, what a natural. So we ended up with a whole semi-load of Novi engines and parts that hadn't been touched in over 25 years. They sat in a warehouse in Novi, Michigan.
I love that car.
Yeah. And so anyway, I also have the original Novi, the 1941 Miller Ford Novi.
Did Vukovich drive that, or did
Vukovich never drove a Novi. No. Chet Miller and Ralph Hepburn. The first one was Ralph Hepburn, and it's down in my shop. And then, so anyway, I bought those engines, and they're all out of pinks right now, and I'm going to try and get 4 of them running. So that'll be quite a deal in itself.
Boy.
Yeah. And so
they should have won Indy.
Oh yeah, they certainly had the grunt to do that. But anyway, so that's another piece of racing history we're going to be able to put back together, because I've got the facilities now to be able to do that.
I haven't even thought of those cars first.
Yeah, well, they're all out at Pinks, and like I say, it was a whole semi-load of stuff, and even the patterns for making the crankcase, the case, and
oh wow,
yeah, I've got all that stuff, that came with it. Amazing stuff, crankshafts, just an amazing group of parts and pieces, and we will be able to put at least 4 of those together, and that's quite a deal in itself. Most of the cars most of the Novis, the real Novis, are accounted for. There's several replicas that have been built up, and I've had friends of mine say, now whatever you do, don't sell one of those engines to the guy with the replica cars. They're already telling me what to do with my engines.
I didn't think there was more than 1 or 2.
No, there's the Indianapolis Motor Speedway has one of the original Curtis Craft cars that were built for '46. And then the Indianapolis Motor Speedway has one, and Buck Bodeman has one. That's one that runs. Speedways doesn't run. There's one down at the Talladega Museum, and there's one in Novi, Michigan that's supposed to be put in the library, at their library. and there's a couple more someplace else. The one in Michigan is the Ferguson. It was the four-wheel drive car. And then the one in Talladega, I think, is one of those ones that came along later. That's the rear drive. They finally put the rear wheel. But the two Novis that ran in 46 and 47, one Buck Bodeman has, and the other one Indianapolis Motor Speedway has. So there are at least four of the 6 Novis around. And so anyway, we're going to get the Novi engines running again.
I'd like to hear
That's a
one.
promise, yeah. Well, I plan to take my Novi back to the Speedway for the 100th year, which is next year,
Okay.
and run it there. It's here in the shop. You'll have a chance to see that
really?
before you leave.
Why don't we take a look around and see some of this?
Yeah, be more than happy. Yeah.
Let's take a look here. First, let's have a look at this phenomenal trophy room, and then we'll go downstairs and have you point out a few of these incredible machines.
I'll be more than happy to
So
fill
we'll
you
take
in
a little
on-
brief intermission here. Okay. Tom, you've been talking about all these trophies, and we just wanted to give a brief look-see for our viewers to.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but I'll, for clarification purposes, I mean, most of the trophies you see here on this case, I bought the Dick Wallen collection
Okay.
about a year and a half ago. And most of these trophies here came from that collection,
Okay.
which I'm really excited to have. I mean, for instance, like right here, 1940, it's won by Dwayne Carter. And it's the points championship. Again, like I say, for 1940, he was the winner. Here's one from 1951 that Bill Vukovich won in my dad's car at Pomona. He won the trophy dash. Unfortunately, he came in second in the main event, and Johnny Parsons won the main event that year. This is a more interesting trophy here, and these are the real deals. These aren't the little plastic things you get nowadays. But this is a let's see if I can read the name here. But the point of the whole thing is I just wanted to open this up. There's a radio inside.
Oh my.
Yeah. And again, this is Dwayne Carter, 1941 Motor City Speedway Championship Trophy. But take a look at that. And I mean, to pick that thing up takes a little bit of effort. Where nowadays you get a trophy and you just. This one here is Jimmy Bryant, Huntington Beach, CRA Trophy Dash, won by. I'm sorry, it said Jimmy Bryant, Jim Rathman. This trophy this is Art Sparks in 1932. This trophy, and here's a picture of him holding the trophy. This is a crankshaft out of an Offenhauser, and it just goes on and on like that. This one is Sacramento winner, Tiny Lund. 1940, Sam Hanks. And downstairs in my trophy case, I have one of his original helmets. And this one's Jimmy Bryant, winner, Prescott Fairgrounds.
Yeah. Has Alice been out here?
Alice has not been here. And it's interesting, I thought she might have shown up one time when they had an old timers event here. And for some reason, Bob Falcon was here, and I thought he might bring her, but
She's on my board, and
yeah.
I'm gonna nag her.
Yeah, because I mean, when they get downstairs, if we think about it, I've got Sam's uniform that he wore when he won the race at Indy,
really?
and one of his helmets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a walk
Okay.
downstairs.
Yeah, look forward to it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Love it.
You see some of the pencil sketches here, for different things, and the drawings. This is all Wallen stuff.
Tom, let's get a shot from up here,
Okay.
just to get an idea. Amazing. This is a collection. We're looking at not all of his cars, but probably most of them. But you get an idea. We'll go down and take a close-up look at some of his favorites. Just wanted you to see that.
See, like the pencil sketch here. There's the oil. See, they did the pencil. So it's kind of neat to have that stuff.
Really. Yeah, your photographic and your art collection is may sometimes be worth a lot more than a car. You never know. So I'm going to let you lead us around.
Okay.
We could probably start right here
Okay.
and do some of.
Yeah.
I'd like to have you go back over the car.
Yeah, okay. Well, as we talked earlier about, this sickness of mine and it all took place, back when I was just a young kid. I'm showing you pictures here of the old Gardena Bowl, which is was the original Carroll Speedway, and is basically made all out of wood. The crash walls and everything else had no press box, and they used the Abbey Rents folding chairs. And then that got changed because the first time they had motorcycle races down there, and going to a motorcycle race at any type of motorcycle race, and beg my forgiveness to all the motorcycle enthusiasts there are, but I'm going to say it anyway, just for the record, is like going from a Raiders game to a Angels baseball game. The relationship to cars and motorcycles. The reason I bring this up is that, and I was there, they got drunk. They're drunker than hell, and I didn't even know what that was at my early age. I mean, I knew something was wrong. And they picked up the folding chairs and started fights with each other with the folding chairs. So that was the end of the folding chairs deal, because just safety reasons. But they rented something like 2,000 or 3,000 folding chairs for people to sit in, because they just had these steps for the bleachers, but they didn't have the seats. When they rebuilt Carroll Speedway, all that was concrete, and they built a press box, and that's this picture right here with the Vermont Drive-In Theater right adjacent to it. And there's one thing that you'll notice in common with both of these pictures, is right here at 182nd in Vermont, which is right here, is that fire station is still there to this day.
Oh, really?
And Ascot Racetrack was right up the street here.
Okay.
On Vermont. So anyway, we still have some, and these oil tanks are still there to this day, the big oil tanks. And then there's no Dominguez Channel. Once they constructed Dominguez Channel, which went adjacent to these power lines right here, this whole thing was drained then for the storms. And you didn't have these floods like you had now. And this was an old dump. This was an old dump right here, and a slough. Because water just sat there because it really had no place to drain. So anyway, this is where I grew up. I spent an insurmountable amount of my time.
Well, your dad built?
Yeah, he built both of these tracks.
both.
I mean, the same track, but he built it and then rebuilt it. And people like Bill White and J.C. Agajanian promoted the races there. And I'm pictured here, probably about 8 or 9 years old, with George Seeger, one of the better roadster guys that ran down there at the time. There's a story about my dad out of the Inglewood Daily News in 1951. Here's a letter from my dad in 1947 giving J.C. Agajanian permission to promote the races at the racetrack. So that's kind of what you see here. I mean, this is where the whole thing, this is where my sickness was. I acquired my sickness.
When you got infected.
Yeah, exactly. There's all kinds of pictures here of Dad's cars, and he with J.C. Agajanian, Chuck Stevenson, and stuff like that. It just goes on and on. So I mean, that's where the whole thing pretty much started. So
Where do you want to take us on a little tour of some of these gorgeous?
Well, maybe this is a good place to at least start. Because everybody kind of sets their own rules, and one of my rules was, if I was to be a really serious collector of Indianapolis and open wheel type racing, that I felt that anybody that can claim that should have at least one winning car at Indianapolis.
Okay.
And I set out to find that. And we're standing right adjacent to the Norton car that Bobby Unser drove to the win in 1981. It's a Penske PC9. And ironically, it turned out to be the biggest disputed win in the history of the 500. He won the race and got all the accolades. And as they rebroadcast the race that night, and Jackie Stewart and all those started pointing out the fact that as he came out of the pits, he was passing cars instead of blending. Pat Patrick protested the race the next day and the car, because he came in second, Mario Andretti was the driver. And the next morning, USAC gave the win to Pat Patrick and Mario Andretti. And there's a very sterile picture here on the wall of him, the car sitting at the start-finish line with the Borg Warner trophy behind it and nobody in the stands. It's probably the most depressing picture you ever saw in your life. And so Penske said no to that, who was the owner of this car, filed a protest, another protest. 138 days later, a 3-judge panel heard it. 2 of the 3 judges gave the win to Penske and Bobby Unser in perpetuity. That was his 3rd win and final win. Bobby fined him $40,000. So I don't care.
You got them both.
They're both here. And to back it up, right here in front of us is the 3rd place car, which is a '78 McLaren M24B that Vern Schuppan drove the 3rd place that year. So, and the nice thing about racing now, if I can just editorialize for a minute, is here's the '78 McLaren, an '81 Penske, an '81 Patrick. They all have Cosworth engines with different turbocharger setups on them, you know, which made it kind of nice as opposed to the cookie cutter racing, the spec racing that we have now.
Yeah.
I'm dying that someday it goes back to that. I mean, they may never live long enough to see it. So, you know, as I acquired these things, this, as I mentioned to you earlier, this is the first car I owned right here. This was the '86 March. Yes, this is the '86 March that that Foyt drove in '86, Davy Jones in '87, Rocket Moran in '88 and '89, and Trent Shoring Company was a partial sponsor of this car in '88. It has nothing of Trent Shoring Company on it now for the pure and simple reason that it had nothing to do with this car when I bought it at a sale in '92. And along with that, I have the fuel tank that was in it still had the Trent Shoring Company sticker on it when I bought it in 1992. So, and I just ran this car not over a month ago at California Speedway, and probably down the front straightaway got up to a couple hundred miles an hour.
Come on.
Yes, it's quite a piece, even at this
Lord.
late stage in its life. So, it's a fabulous car to drive on an oval. You know,
Yeah, but that's too fast.
didn't feel like it. I was there for a vintage event which we ran on the California Speedway road course, and then the old Indy cars and stuff, they let us drive on the oval. Adjacent to it is a 98 Dallara, which has the Aurora Oldsmobile engine. That finished second in 1999 with Jeff Ward, the Yahoo car. I drove that at Indianapolis last May for the 4 or 5 lap drive around they let you do on Carburation Day. I was in that car. So.
These are vintage machines over here.
Yeah, the sprint car right here, the Cheesemanoffy, it's one of the famous sprint cars of its era. The who's who of racing drove this car, and Eddie Sachs won the 1958 Midwest Sprint Car Championship in that car. And this car was built by, of all people, Bob Pancratz, right in Los Angeles. Yeah. It was new in 1952 and raced into the 60s. There's one article that proclaims it the prettiest sprint car ever built.
I think so. It is
It's quite a piece, and it's modeled, quite honestly, after the car he fashioned for Dad, the sprint car that Troy was famous. It's got the same lines. This is a tube chassis. Dad's car was a rail car. So I'm really pleased to have it. It's got a great history, and like I say, you name the driver. It has a few of them listed on the side, and that's only a fraction of the guys that drove this car over the years. And, the car up in front here has no engine in it. It's over at Pink. Over at Ed Pink's, it's an Offenhauser. This is one of the two tube-frame rear-engine cars that Watson made for the 1964 Indianapolis 500. Don Branson drove this one, and the other car, I own the other car, the two tube chassis cars. I own the other one, which was a 4-cam Ford that Roger Ward drove to second place that year. And that's a total restoration. And the engine, again, that engine is a 4-cam Ford. It's over at the Pink place. This is an interesting car right here, this Watson Roadster. This car was the start of the end of Watson-Zink relationship, for those who are familiar with that relationship. Watson left Estes and went to work with Jack Zink, who's a big industrialist in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he built the Watson Roadsters and took two of them back in 1958, and Ed Elysian put one on the pole and Jimmy Reese was second on the front row. And in his spare time, quote unquote, Watson made another chassis, which was his. He made it on his spare time, as the story goes, and took the rolling chassis back to the Speedway and put it up for sale. Ex-engine and transmission. Sold the car to a fellow by the name of Lee Elkin, which is the McNamara Trucking Company. And they put an engine transmission in it and put Dick Rathman in it, and he went out and knocked Ed Elysian off the pole. And Jack never got over that. To make matters worse, Dick Rathman and Ed Elysian, being old Southern California guys, needled each other prior to the race about who was going to lead the first lap. So they go down, flying down into turn 3 on the first lap. Elysian gets underneath Rathman going into turn 3, spins, takes both of these guys up the wall, starts a 16-car wreck on the first lap, so neither one of them ever led the first lap. Pat O'Connor got killed, and this was the car that was on the pole and was the start of the end of the Zink-Watson relationship. And then from there on, Watson went over to Wilkie, and we all know that story of what a success that was with the wins and things they had at the Speedway. But anyway, this was the car that caused that whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah, and ran through the mid to late 60s at the Speedway. You know, different. Jim Robbins owned this car at one time after McNamara sold it. The white car, the white car here, the Weinberger Holmes car. This is another very special Watson Roadster. This ran there 4 years, 62, 3, 4, and 5. It's trimmed the way it ran in 1965 as the Weinberger Holmes car, and Gordon Johncock was Rookie of the Year that year in this car. The year before, 1964, it finished third with Lloyd Ruby. This car ran 4 years at the Speedway, never finished worse than 11th, as high as third. Finished every lap of the race it was in. Every year it finished 200 laps. And the 3 years prior to this, it was the Bill Forbes car. And I was honored in 1999 to bring this back, even though it wasn't the Bill Forbes colors, to let Lloyd Ruby drive it because it was the only car drivable that he had driven over the years. And he got in the car on Lloyd Ruby Day and drove this around the track about 4 laps when he was honored that day. I was thrilled to have that experience, be able to share it with him and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So this is one of the famous Watson dirt cars that Roger Ward made very famous. Won a championship in it. Just a beautiful car. We've run it a couple times. The last time it ran is my mechanic, Mark Hart, which I've talked about already. He's a former SCRA sprint car driver. So we set this thing all up and took it up to the horse ring at Industry Hills. And Bruce Pinhall puts on Speedway motorbikes. And they asked us to bring this car, a midget that I have here, and a late model midget, and he drove this around the little horse track and got this thing all sideways. The prettiest thing ever. You know, it looked like a train going around that place. It's so big. This is I have sister cars to this. I have the Roadster, which is over in the shop being worked on, and this is a purpose-built dirt car. Nice history, Bell Lines Trucking. The son of the guy that owned this car was just here last week, John Elmas, and he was thrilled to see these two cars. This is 100% original. I bought this at the Walters auction about 6 or 7 years ago in Dayton, Ohio. Walter family, they owned this car at one time, and I've changed it back to the Beltline Special, but this is 100% original car the way you see it here. There's not a thing on this car that had to be fabricated.
You've mentioned several times changing, putting the car back with the original colors and, like, just as you say, do you do that here?
Yeah, we don't paint here, but we do all the metal fabrications.
But somebody had to, you must have the pictures of
Yes.
the way it
Yeah, we have a whole, the book. I mentioned the books.
You mentioned the book.
Yeah, I show you the book. on this one.
Otherwise, I was wondering how you do that.
Right, yeah. We have the book and the pictures. We really work those pictures over to make sure that we don't get caught in a corner and do something to it that's not supposed to be done. We pick out a certain period and we identify it as that,
Okay.
build it to that period. Because it could be changed over the period.
Okay.
This one is got a pretty famous history, and this is how I found it.
Oh, Lord.
That's in Colton, California, and a fellow that I have looked for cars for me knew of this car and told me about it. And it's the house special.
It's a basket.
Yeah.
If you look at this, there's no race car there. It's just a
My
pile of
wife
stuff.
said the same thing. She said, "What are you looking at?"
Yeah.
I said, "That."
That's a bad-looking backyard is what it is.
But anyway, this belonged to a sprint car driver named Terry Caywell. And prior to that, it was owned by a guy named Jimmy Maeda. Those are names that are familiar to racing guys. And it was cut down to a sprint car from a championship car from this. And then prior to that, it was an old guy named Bill Ward. He bought it from Mary Holman. That should be a familiar name. Tony Holman's daughter. That's where the H comes from. That's the how. The Holman. The O is for Ober. He's a judge in Indianapolis. And the W is the Walcott. These were all friends of her dad's, Tony Holman.
Okay.
Okay? And that's where the how comes from. And she married a guy named Elmer George.
Oh,
Mary Holman George. And he was the driver, and they were the parents of Tony George.
Okay.
So this is quite a piece of history.
Yeah,
right
it
here.
is.
Yeah, this is one of the 3 how specials over the years. And Watson built the chassis, and a guy named Bob DeBishop put the whole thing together, and he was the chief mechanic. He lives in Vista to this day and has come and seen the car. And he was here one day. That's a picture of Watson there at the Speedway. He hadn't seen it since I rebuilt it.
Oh,
And he was thrilled to see the car.
I'll
Yeah.
bet.
Yeah. So that's what you can do to them. I mean, if you have the time and the patience to.
But I can't believe this. Could you see that?
Oh, yeah.
This, that, and that's what it turned into. And
And then there she is. That's Mary Holman George. That's their son. And he got shot.
this is a page out of that, one of your books,
One of
right?
those, yeah. Okay, then we have another, this is a complete, this is a relatively famous car. This is a Phillips, a Judd Phillips car, built for Bob Estes. And there's a lot of things here that are kind of neat. First of all, I lived in Inglewood. I grew up in Inglewood. I was born in Los Angeles, grew up in Inglewood. Dad used to buy his Lincoln and Mercury's from Bob Estes. His place was just kind of catty-cornered from my dad's. Bob Estes' place was just kind of catty-cornered from my dad's older brother's drugstore in Inglewood, Malloy Pharmacy. And Don Freeland drove this car. He's a good friend of Jimmy Reese, who drove my dad's car. This car was a Monza car. It raced at Monza, but unfortunately, in the meantime, they'd cut it up. They've cut it up and made a sprint car out of it. So we're going to have to do the same thing to this one we just did to the one we just previously saw.
Yeah.
Fortunately, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. You see the Bob Estes special here?
Yeah.
If you look on this side, it says Bob Estes is cut off right here. So close to a foot has been cut out of his car.
Oh.
And we have, as luck would have it, a guy gave me some magazines. I started looking through the magazines, old Speed Age and things like that. We found a picture of this car with no skin on it.
Oh,
So
okay.
we have a picture of what this chassis is supposed to look like, when it was new. It had crossbars in the front, and diagonal crossbars in the front. So, I mean, we have an opportunity to put this back together just like it was when it originally raced. But I'm torn from the standpoint that the paint's so original, and this is all Monza stuff, that, I mean, I hate to even think about repainting it, but I don't know. I mean, it's so beat up that, that I
Yeah.
may have to do something like that. So, right over in front of us, this is the replica car. This is the replica of the 59 Miller. And you know, while I'm talking about it, this is something that's special to us collectors. I've never said anything different than this about this car. And I actually have a board for it that I take with me when I show it. And right across the top it says 1959 Watson Roadster / replica. And a guy was looking at that one time and he saw my name at the bottom of the board. And he comes over to me and he says, "Are you Tom Malloy?" I go, "Yeah." He says, "I like you." And I'm sitting there going, "Well, what's the deal here?" And he says, and I said, "Well, what's that? Why is that?" And he walks over and points to the replica. And he says, "That right there." And I said, "Well, that's what it is." He says, "You'll be surprised how many people don't do that." And I says, "That's their problem, not mine." So it's nice when you tell the truth about your cars, because you never have to go back. And when I sell this, it'll be the same thing, a replica. But it's a perfect replica of that car, but it's still a replica. And somebody would love to have this. It's a completely running car. You can see right here, Alonzo drove it to California Speedway. You know, this is an exhibition thing, but that's what it is. It's got the Offenhauser engine in it, and everything it's supposed to be. And according to the letter I got from Roger Ward when I bought the car, there are certain pieces on this car that were on the original car. I don't know what they are. It could be the Zeus button right here, but it doesn't matter to me. That's what it is. I don't know. This is a real Miller. This is a Miller Offie. It's trimmed the way Maury Rose drove it in 1937 at the Speedway.
That's the name I've been going crazy
Road.
trying to. Didn't he drive a Novi?
No, but yes, he did. Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. But if he didn't, he drove cars that looked identical to him, because Curtis made the Blue Crown cars. Remember that name? He
Yes,
drove
I
the
do.
Blue Crown cars. They didn't have Novis in them, but he could have certainly driven a Novi. I'd have to look. I don't want to say for sure, but it sounds.
It was just when we were talking upstairs.
Yeah, Maury Rose.
I was trying to come up with that. I couldn't.
Yeah, well, he drove this car in 37.
Boy, this looks like a real piece of work.
It is. It's quite a deal. And Johnny Rutherford's got a little history in this car. It belonged to somebody who lived in a home in the town that he lived in, and they used to, as he tells the story, terrorize the town driving this thing around.
For sure.
And he's actually driven this at California Speedway about 10 years ago when I owned it.
Boy, this is gorgeous.
This one I have to tell you a little bit of story about because it's kind of special. First of all, it's a Myron Stevens chassis. It's a beautiful car, off a 270-inch Offenhauser engine, and this ran in 52, 3, and 4 in Indianapolis. In 54, Ed Elysian drove it, and that's the year I went. Dad took me back to see his car run. I was 15 years old at the time, and this car finished 18th. And the importance of that to me is this could be as close as I ever get to my dad's car, because my dad's car finished 17th. The one I'm trying to find. So that's the special. That's one of the special things. The other special thing is that I took this back to the Speedway one year to share with people on Carburation Day, along with a couple other cars that I had. And I'm standing probably 50 feet away talking to some other people who brought their cars back, just visiting. Guy walks over to me and he says, "They pointed me out, you're Tom Malloy." And I go, "Yeah." And he points back to this car and he says, "See the Chapman car there?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "That's yours, right?" I go, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I'm H.A. Chapman Jr. My dad used to own that car." I said, "Well, come on, we got to go back and take a picture of that." So I have a picture of H.A. Chapman Jr. standing right where you are, me standing next to him, and took a picture of this car. Those are the special times you have with this stuff, when you can share that. Like the son of the guy that owned that car showing up here the other day with his wife, taking pictures of it. Just couldn't get enough of the whole deal. And he was with the Roadsters over inside the shop over there, and he couldn't get enough of the fact, because he was on the boat when that car was shipped to Monza for the race of two worlds, and Kerry Agajanian was with him. So I mean, it's really kind of neat stories that you hear.
I remember that, Mark.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the beauty of this car, is it may be as close as I ever get to Dad's Indy car. This one has really no history, but the thing about it is that I wanted when I bought this car, that's a 1929 Miller Marine engine.
Oh, wow.
The tag right here says number 5. And I don't know how many they built, but that's a special piece right there. That was the precursor of the Offenhauser. The car, I don't have any knowledge. I've tried to find out what it is, but I didn't care about that. I wanted the engine.
Just run.
We've had it running one time. It's been quite some time, but we did have it. You have to push start it to get it going. But we had it running about probably 5 years ago.
Miller was years ahead of his time.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? This is one of Frank Curtis's, this might be Curtis Craft Row right in here. This is one of Frank Curtis's 500S's, and this is one of the original 6, which means it's all alloy. After that, he started building fiberglass noses and fiberglass tails. This is all alloy. It's got a 331 Cadillac, hydromatic transmission, and Frank McGurk originally owned this car. He was, again, from Inglewood, and he had a speed shop there.
Bill Murphy had one.
Yes, Bill Murphy had with a Buick in it. And Troy Ruttman even drove that. Did you? And Troy drove that at one time.
Really liked it.
Yeah, yeah. This has got a 331 Cadillac engine in it, hydromatic, just the way they raced it. So that's one of the Balch Brothers midgets. Eddie Hadrad drove this and made it very famous. Yeah, and that's one of the Curtis Craft midgets, one of the first ones he built, and ran everywhere. This thing raced everywhere around the country. You know, Coliseum, Rose Bowl, Gilmore, you name it. This is one of those special midgets. And then this is one that we drove up at that horse arena, and Jerome Rondella drove this one, and Wally Pankratz drove his late model midget that he races. So, and then I have a picture, interestingly enough, because Bob Pankratz, his dad, drove for Balch Brothers. I have a picture of Wally sitting in this car when he was 6 months old. I mean, they were holding him up right here when he was 6 months old, and he got to drive it about 60 years later.
That's great.
Yeah. So, and then this is a Curtis. That's a KK 2000. Ran at Indianapolis in 48, 49 as the Don Lee special. Don Lee was a Los Angeles industrialist, and he was the first Cadillac dealer for the state of California. They had a broadcasting company. Yeah, Don Lee Broadcasting Company.
Right.
And it was very well connected to Hollywood.
Had one of the prettiest little Ferraris I ever
Yeah,
saw.
yeah. And he had Alphas that he ran at the Speedway, and Maserati and Mercedes. So anyway, this ran there in 48 and 49 and 48. It finished 5th. Mac Helling drove it both years. And in 50, he sold this car to MGM Studios. And it was used to do the still and stage shots for the movie To Please a Lady with Clark Gable and Barbara Stanwyck.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was called the Mike Brennan Special number 17, and the reason it was number 17 is they dubbed the film in for the 1951 race in Indianapolis to make the story. You know, Barbara Stanwyck, the reporter, and Clark Gable, the race car driver, and it had a wreck and a fire in that race, and so they dubbed it in to make it work. So there's some real Indy 500 film along with the movie, and which made for the story. And Bud Rose was his stand-in driver, and these two guys almost looked identical. Bud Rose and Clark Gable, because they had that. I mean, you could I would be very serious that in a low light you could probably not tell them apart. These are two of those roadsters I was telling you about that all the famous drivers on the West Coast started it. Walt James spent a lot of time in this one. It was called Pinky, that is number 66. It's got a 6-cylinder GMC in it. This has a Riley, 4-port Riley. And like I say, I drove this at the Monterey Historics this year. Yeah. While you're there, I'll take the hood off. I see the belts unbuckled, and I'll just take the hood off. You can peer right into that. Yeah, there's the 4-port Riley right there.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And like I say, I bought that from Rosie.
High school, that was every kid's dream.
Yeah, I bought that from Rosie shortly before he passed away. You know, and I gave the money to his daughter when she came down, and you know he'd passed since then. And this was actually at the NHRA museum when I bought it, and she started crying, and I didn't know what the hell to do, you know. But he was thrilled that I got it, and knew I'd take good care of it, and I'm honored to have it. So. Quite a piece.
Well, that was
an
exciting piece of history.
Yeah. Then over,
Take a look at the,
and over here is one of the original 1935 Miller Fords. They made 10 of them. 4 of them made the race. It's got the Ford flathead in it.
oh my.
And they all dropped out of the race at different times because the exhaust manifold was too close to the steering gearbox, and they all froze up. And Ford got madder than heck, put them all away, and in 1937, this being 1935, he sold one to a guy named Lou Welch. And if you want to walk over this way, as we're walking by, you'll see my 962 Porsche that I finished 5th at the Monterey Historics in 2009. One of the Leighton House cars, and an old 1925 Dodge business sedan that we're doing a little work on the engine. We'll also cross by here a McLaren M80 that I'll be racing at Birmingham at Barber Motorsports Park here in about a month and a half. It's a McLaren M80, big block Chevy. And if you'll turn around, this is one of the sister cars. This is one of the sister Miller Fords. And this was the original Miller Ford Novi, and you're looking at a Novi engine.
Wow, get a good shot of that.
And we're putting it back together because we had a problem with the starting gear that we had. You can't get them at Napa, so we had to have them built. And Alan here is bolting them back together. I doubt we'll get it together today, but we'll probably fire this damn thing up tomorrow. And it'll be the first time this thing's run probably in about 6 or 7 years. So we're looking forward to that. This is the transaxle out of the front wheel drive out of the Miller Ford, and they had to beef up all the gears and everything inside of it to take the torque of this big V8 Novi engine, as opposed to a small V8 flathead. And Ralph Hepburn drove this to 4th place in 1941. Full seal fast car, and then they didn't race there from 42, 43, 44, and 45. And the first race is 1946, and Frank Curtis built 2 purpose-built cars to put the Novis in. Indianapolis Motor Speedway owns one of those, and a guy named Buck Bodeman owns the other one.
Has this got any front suspension?
Yeah, there's springs down inside here. This is 4-wheel independent suspension. There's half springs down underneath.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you were to stick your hand underneath that aluminum casting, you'd see that. That's the blower. And then if you want to adjust your carburetors, look down underneath here. I don't know if you can see that, but look, there's your carburetors. Down underneath. He hasn't bolted those up yet, but they bolt up to
So you don't recommend leaning down and adjusting the
I
carburetor
don't think so.
at speed?
And then these were 2-man cars, and then they quit that after the war, so they put the oil tank here, where the righty mechanic used to be. I'm sorry, it's kind of half apart from the standpoint that we're just putting it back together, but
I meant to ask you about tires.
yeah.
What do you do about tires?
Well, you buy tires like this to run them, but you try to buy period tires to show them. And now Coker Tire has built a Firestone replica, a new replica of the Indianapolis Firestone tires. You can buy those from Coker Tire, different sizes.
But you've got a lot of different
Right.
sizes and shapes. And,
It's a hassle, but you just deal with it.
um,
Yeah, it's
particularly if you're going to go race. I mean,
yeah. You want
the
some.
vintage-
Well, I mean, the vintage stuff you buy the late model good tires.
okay.
I mean, one of the cars that's in the trailer on the way to Road Atlanta, that's got a brand new set of tires on it.
Yeah, you don't want 50-year-old
Right,
tires.
no. This is another roadster we're putting together. Bell Lines, I told you that we have the roadster here, and you just saw the dirt car a little earlier, and we're redoing the rear end of it. This is the center section for the rear end. We had a problem, the axle was bent, and we needed a proper offset and things like that, so we're working on that. But we do all that stuff right here in the shop.
That's a beautiful.
Yeah, it's a hologram. Here's the side plates. And here's the ring gear. You get the pinion there. You get the ring gear here. So anyway, it's just, you know, we're constantly working on stuff in here, rebuilding it. And we went by a black 289 Cobra over there. My wife and I just did the Copper State 1000. We drove all that all over northern Arizona for 4 days. So we stay busy with this stuff.
Seems to me you do. I don't know how you stay.
Well, this is full-time or part-time employment, depending on what Alan wants here. Right, Alan?
Hey, well, Tom, I can't tell you, it's been a phenomenal experience.
Yeah. Now, we walked by some pretty interesting cars over there, which are some listers, a couple of listers, and we got a GT. Yeah, we ought to go over and take a look at that. The engine out of this is at Pink's, a little overhead valve, you know, small block Chevy. This car right here, we just put this new header, my mechanic here just built this new header system, and so we had to repaint the side panels. But this car, 2 years ago, I went 175 miles an hour in at Bonneville, 32 Ford. I got my dash plaque, they sent that to me, so I'm legal, so I don't have to BS anybody about it. But anyway, because we had to do some work on the side panels, they're out being painted, we sent the hood to make sure it's matched properly. Which is kind of a problem. Yeah.
That had to be a deal.
Now, we put lights on it and stuff since, because this is actually, I've got it registered for the road. So we put lights on it, which would come off. You know, there's a fan, electric fan back here, which will come off. There's an alternator there, we take that off when we go, if and when we go to Bonneville again. There's the uniform Hanks was wearing when he won at Indy, right up there. And there's Johnny Parsons' uniform, right there, down on the, right down below us here. You see it right down there?
Oh, okay.
Okay. And then on the way over to, this is the car, the BT-18, wherever I may be in vintage racing, this is the thing that got me there. I learned more about driving than I deserve to know because of this car.
Got to be an absolute hoot to drive.
Yeah. One of the famous pink Ford midget engines. You know, they won all kinds of races with those pink Fords. And then he got in and built was primarily responsible for building the Toyota midget engines. Had pink racing engines. Memorabilia here, and here's an interesting one. Here's Sam Hanks' helmet. Right here. This, we were talking about the 1912 Santa Monica races. This fob right here goes on a watch.
Oh.
That's a bronze medallion from the 1912 Santa Monica races. Oh. That's a picture of Dick Wallen and myself here in front of the cases. He used to just have this at his house, all this stuff. You know, here's trophies here. You know, name the guy, Troy Ruttman, Bryant. You know, here's Johnny Parsons Jr., Gordon Johncock, and here's Alan Heath. There's a picture of the helmet. And
Heath drove a midget for the guy that I used to drive.
Yeah.
For Carson.
Yeah. One of Wally Pancratz's midgets. Trent Shoring Company sponsored him for years, and part of the deal was that I ended up on the cars. We'll take this to Paris or Ventura and play with it. Kick it. Different engines here. There's a set of real doors from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway garages, and I'm going to build right in this location here a replica of the garage and hang those doors on. And a series of different engines there. You know, a turbocharged Offie, 2 Cosworths, an Aurora. You know, so, and they're all fairly fresh engines. If not fresh, they're very fresh. Three 86 March chassis. This is the chassis that Fittipaldi finished 7th in 1986, and I'll restore it to the Marlboro colors when I restore it. That's a Sneva chassis. And then what I'll do is I'll take all the stuff off this one, because I used to vintage race this, and put it on that chassis, the purple chassis, because that has no history. So that'll be my vintage car, and these will go back to what they should be, and I've got the Cosworth engines to go in it. We'll go down through here and then circle back around. You know, like for instance, Troy Ruttman's helmet, and there's the picture of him with the face mask and all that. Sammy Swindell, Mark Donahue, Bill Vukovich, the son of Billy Vukovich. You know, over here, Sneva, Janet Guthrie, Tony George, Sheldon Kinzer, 2 Andretti helmets, Rutherford. This should be very interesting to you here. Here's the winning watch with the 24 hours at Daytona I bought from Rocky Moran and his helmet. And here's the winning ring for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 1953. That's the winning ring.
Oh my.
And here's 2 of Vukovich's helmets. Here's Jimmy Clark's helmet. There's Parnelli Jones and AJ Foyt's helmet.
These helmets were a joke.
Yeah. And one of the nice pieces is that there's Jimmy Reese's helmet when he drove my dad's car. I have that. So that's quite a piece. But it's really, you know, Peter Revson, Rip Williams, Hurtubise. It just goes on and on, you know. Just,
Yeah.
I mean, then sneak around the corner over here and we'll show you the listers. Here's my 270 Lola.
I recognize that.
I raced the living, you know what, out of that. I love that car. You know, that's a race car there.
Yeah.
There's an Eagle 5000, the only one Dan built like that. Finished second at the original Long Beach Grand Prix. The likes of James Hunt and Bobby Unser, Vern Schuppen drove that. I bought that from Vern, and I raced that quite a bit. It's the paint job is really authentic, perfectly running mechanical car. We've got that thing in top shape. This is the first car. This is the PC6. PC meaning Penske. This is the first car to qualify at over 200 miles an hour at Indianapolis with Tom Sneva. Sat on the pole and finished second in 1978. He went 200 miles an hour for 2 laps the year before, but all 4 laps were 200 or over with this car. First car to do that. Penske has the car that went 2 laps at over 200 miles an hour. I got the one that went 4 laps. Interestingly enough, too, when we talk about the winning car, Penske, he has 13 of the 15 winning cars. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway has 1, and I have the other. Those are the only 2 cars he doesn't own. Here's a Lister Jaguar Nobly.
Drove one for Al Dean.
Yeah. There's a Lister Chevy.
That's
No,
what I drove.
okay.
Chevy
Right there.
with a Bruce Grow in there.
So there's 2 original, these are original pieces. I think
Yeah.
one's 118 and 112 or something, or vice versa. And then here's the GT40 Mark IV J11. And that's been requested to be at 2 shows this year. You know, they don't say anything about me, but they want my cars to come to the shows. That's going to be at the Monterey Historics and up at a Kirkland, Washington show at the request of the people up there because they're honoring Carol Shelby. And that was just at the that Riverside
Yeah.
thing not too long ago. That was there. That's the car. Again, at their request. So anyway, that's a little bit about my stuff. There's
Well-
about 6 cars not here, but we won't talk about those. We'll have to get them back someday and have you back. So
Okay.
yeah,
We'll,
yeah, just all the memorabilia that's around that means so much.
I think I've been to a fair amount of collections. What I love is the way you put this.
That's nice of you to say. Now, do you remember Leonard Cerdan?
The name is.
Well, he was a very famous mechanic and car owner. He got a hold of me, and he was worried about his collection of stuff being thrown away when he died. He as much as said, you know, this is actually words. He says, I'm on my way out. And I just want somebody to have this stuff. Well, what do you want for it? I just want somebody to have it. He's in Orlando, Florida. Sebring, Florida. And I'd just been to Florida. And he calls me about 2 months later. He gets a hold of me. So anyway, I send a friend of mine from Jacksonville down to him and get the stuff. And he had trouble telling me where he lived. I mean, that's kind of like what were we talking about, you know? So anyway, I sent the guy down there. We put all this stuff in a box, and he shipped it up to me. And it's all these trophies here. I mean, this guy was really famous. And then he sent me 6 photo albums. Jimmy Oskey was here and started looking at those photo albums. I went up to Jimmy and said, here's the keys. When you get done, just lock up the place. I'm being a little facetious, but not much. Jimmy could identify the people in these pictures and told me all about this guy. there's another thing here, these are things you really need to, I'm glad we're talking about it, because in the hallway there, I had, as I was going through the photo albums, there was an envelope that at the end had been ripped off, and I pulled it out, and a check had never been cashed for $5 from the California Roadster Association, Racing Association. And a fellow that was the secretary of it has his haircut, same place I phoned my haircuts into. And I took a copy of it to him because the check had never been cashed. Louis, I forget his last name. Anyway, I gave him a copy of it, and he was thrilled to have it, 1968. So Oski goes by the thing, because I have it framed inside in the officer. And he says, do you know about this? And I said, well, the check was never cashed. I got all this stuff from Leonard Surdam. Matter of fact, I'd like to show you these albums. He says, no, do you know about this? I says, well, this is what I told you. He says, Hank Henry got killed that day. He says, $2.50 would have been his. He says, that's the reason Leonard never cashed it. I said, could you tell me the story on that, write it down? So he did. He wrote me a whole page about the whole thing. Now, he was in the race, Jimmy Oski. So, I mean, I've got this whole history of this check now that you just couldn't have done had this stuff been thrown away.
No.
And these are all his trophies, and that's him there. There's trophies over there with his picture. But, you know, here it is. You know, it's not thrown away, and he's thrilled. And I sent him some money for the stuff, and he was thrilled to get that, too. So that's the way this stuff happens. All these trophies right here, and these two cases are all Leonard Surdam's.
You've done a phenomenal job. I mean, what I see here, this is a career all by itself.
I'm having a good time.
Yeah.
And I mentioned to you, all the books on each car. Every one of these cars inside the office there has a book.
Yeah.
And every time somebody sends me something or I see it in a magazine, take it out and put it in that book. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your hospitality and
It's an honor.
giving us a chance to peek into your history. 'Cause, wow, what a story.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the guy to tell me to get out of here.
Well, don't be in a rush.
Thank you.
Thank you very